younger Canadians aged 18 to 24 are far more likely to think the country belongs to Indigenous people at 58%. Good job. God damn. I always hear the kids aren't all right, but it turns out the kids are very high polling in thinking that, history is history, which is nice. That bodes well for the future. The younger people are not buying into this entire ridiculous idea that the King of England should own all the land in Canada, which I think is good.
I was 6 years old when they took me to a residential school. I remember the day walking toward that school with my mother, and it was a silent walk, and I was so afraid. 20 or 30 little kids herded into the showers, and then your body being painted in white liquid of some kind, your hair cropped and then doused in kerosene. And that was pretty traumatizing. The school held roughly 220 people, half boys, half girls, and we were segregated. If I was caught waving at my sister, there'd be a punishment for it. And so as a result of that segregation, I never really learned any social skills that young people should be learning as they grow up. From a religious and spiritual perspective, of course, the churches lobbied hard to convert Indigenous people, Aboriginal people. They said that we were heathen and pagan. They targeted language in those things we had learned through all of millennia to know where we came from, to know who we were, as something that had to be eliminated. Before that time, I lived in a place called HARASSMENT. They call it Guilford Island now. We harvested from the forest all of the animals that we needed to provide us sustenance, and from the ocean in front of us as well, all of the species of whales and mink and fish. And I had a connection to the environment around us. And so after having spent years in those schools, by the time we were ready to leave, most of us were pretty broken. Many of us, including myself, descended into addictions, alcoholism, and violence, and it was pretty difficult. Those schools lasted for over 100 years. There were over 150,000 little children. And the last school that closed in Canada was in 1996 in Saskatchewan. There was a history on this land that had been absolutely ignored. Nobody knew about the residential school legacy. Nobody knew about the intent of the Indian Act, the chronic challenges now facing Aboriginals. And we're starting to accept the idea that we have this shared history for which we all are responsible for. When the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report was submitted, I was in the room when Justice Murray Sinclair, the chair of the commission, denounced Canada. He had just recited a litany of intensive harms against Aboriginal people. And when he said, "Canada, you have committed cultural genocide," there was just a silence in that room, and then all of a sudden it erupted in euphoria. We said, survivors want an apology from the Prime Minister in the House of Commons. And I was there and I heard the words, "I'm sorry," and then I couldn't see because my eyes were just flowing with tears. I was so happy that somebody had said, "I'm sorry." Canada, by the way, is the only Western country that has had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So we're trying to look through a new lens. We and Canadians, we as an Aboriginal, we celebrate each other, everybody cheering each other up as we move toward a more equal, prosperous future for all of us. My name is Chief Robert Joseph, and I believe that Truth and Reconciliation is Canada.
thought it was a beautiful animation, and it also explains things pretty well. I was going to share with everybody. It's available through the CBC funding, obviously, but here is a link for anyone who has not seen it before, wants to share it with anybody. And yeah, the sentiment is actually one of obviously rebuilding, which I think is a really good theme, because the truth part is actually taking place. It's the reconciliation part that's being worked on, and unfortunately, it's also being met with a lot of backlash. This actually got posted today by one Carolyn Elliott, who I believe is trying to run as the new leader of the BC right-wing party. Younger Canadians aged 18 to 24 are far more likely to think the country belongs to Indigenous people at 58%. Good job. God damn. I always hear the kids aren't all right, but it turns out the kids are very high polling in thinking that, history is history. Compared to Canadians aged 65 at 24%. Well, what are you trying to point out there? This is a direct product of an education system that has been relentlessly driving this narrative, unchallenged, for well over a decade. In other words, more than double the number of younger Canadians and older Canadians think true ownership of our country is and should be based on ethnic lines. We won't fix our country until we fix education. And we have to, because history has shown this kind of mentality doesn't lead anywhere good. So it's actually racism, reverse racism, to teach history, if you didn't know. But now you know, so don't teach it. I guess you would prefer that the true ownership of Canada remain with the King of England, because that's kind of the implication here, right? Just so everyone's clear, especially if you're not Canadian, and this might apply as well if there is a Truth and Reconciliation eventually in the United States. But seeing how everything's going with Trump, I don't think that'll be happening anytime soon to native reservations or anything like that. But the idea is not that Europeans have to go back to Europe, or that anyone who was born in Canada suddenly has to leave, or that you lose the property that you own or your land title on your house, that kind of stuff. The difference would be that Indigenous folk, instead of the King of England, who I'm pretty sure most people, do you love the King of England, or do you just love British colonization? Because if you don't, and you think the whole thing is kind of silly, that, Senior Sausage Fingers would actually have his, greasy paws in the ownership of your own property, well, then the title itself would belong to the Indigenous people, and they'd get the taxation, and they'd get to determine whether or not there'd be resource extraction. That's the whole thing. It's not that you lose your houses. I know everyone's so scared that, what happens if we do the land back thing? Well, it's happened many times, and it turns out people didn't get kicked out of their houses. Yeah, it's usually won through the courts, because it turns out those treaties are actually, in today's day and age, being honored, which is kind of a good thing, rather than just being like, no, you don't get to have your house. Also, this theory doesn't really apply, I don't think, to the way you view private property today, right? You wouldn't walk into someone's home and then be like, mine now. And be like, what? No, it's mine now, because I'm here. Well, that's just strange. No, you don't just get to have my house. Well, I say it's mine, and I have a gun, so might makes right. And now it's my house, so mine. Yeah. And then it's like, well, I disagree. And it's like, oh, well, wait. If you're denying my right to just walk into your home and take your house, that's racism. What you've done is a racism. This is reverse racism. But it turns out if anybody sees this whole thing as silly, it turns out it's younger people, which is nice. That bodes well for the future, that younger people are not buying into this entire ridiculous idea that the King of England should own all the land in Canada, which I think is good. I think this one's a typo. I'm not entirely sure, but this is another white supremacist in the country. Yes, we do actually care that our statues were toppled, our streets were renamed, our flags flown at half-mast, our universities were renamed, and our Canada Day was cancelled. Canada Day wasn't cancelled, by the way. All because of a claim that has turned out to be entirely unproven. 99.9% of Canadians think residential schools are a stain on this country and have had a profound consequence on our First Nations countrymen today. Count me amongst the 99.9. That's what I think was the typo, because the replies are filled with people like, wait, you're for saying that residential schools were bad? Did you mean to not include did you mean to say that? I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. But But anyways, talking again about how there's false claims. And then the white supremacist party in Canada, led by Dallas Brody, is releasing a trailer for a new documentary about residential school denialism that they're quite proud of. So when you donate to 1BC, just know that your money is actually going towards their film career aspirations, because I guess they're just being like, oh, this is actually political material. It counts. So you can donate money to a political party so we can keep making these weird ass documentaries. I won't put you through the atrocities of watching the whole thing, but what's fun to see is that there was a cameo in this one.
4 years. There wasn't murder. There wasn't genocide.
Why do you think they are holding to this mass grave story?
So right here, it's like they're basically asking a whole bunch of white people why there was no Indigenous genocide on their nice boats, by the way. I love that. It's like, I just got to take my boat out for some fishing, but I can tell you about why the whole thing is a lie. Yeah, it was all made up. But this one's wild. I don't know if you recognize this guy. It's Billboard Chris. If you don't know Billboard Chris, he's a guy, and you kind of get what is on the packaging here. He stands outside of children's hospitals or children's schools if he's allowed within a certain amount of feet, I think. But usually children's hospitals with giant signs talking about their genitals. That's Billboard Chris. Yeah, big old weirdo. He blocked me on Twitter when I pointed out that he was actually posting pictures of topless teenagers, and that it's kind of fucked up that he's doing that. And he immediately was like, "Oh my God, block!" But he's amongst the right wingers who love posting pictures of other people's surgery scars, and it's kind of fucked up that you're just taking pictures of people you don't know. It's not your own children. It's not your relatives. It's not even your friends. It's just random photos of teenagers and posting topless pictures of them. The same thing like Graham Linehan does and a lot of other weirdos. But what is he doing in a documentary about how the whole residential school system was made up? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I will never watch it. It looks like garbage. But yeah, again, it's Dallas Brody asking all of these right-wingers, what do you think about this? As he's literally standing outside of a children's hospital with a sign that says, children cannot consent to puberty blockers. Yeah, I'm a real professional man. Please don't ask about my wife and our divorce. It's not happening. Just when it comes to the residential school denialism and, the past couple of years, I know I had a long-standing battle with people, white supremacists like Lauren Southern, who at the time I think was having an affair with Destiny, who was also making a lot of weird comments online, including that he wanted to bet me money. I mean, it's deleted now. He deletes a lot of his tweets, but he actually wanted to bet me money that there was never going to be bodies found of any Indigenous kids. So there's been bodies exhumed of Indigenous children. There's a couple articles out now about that. And I don't know if that's going to change anyone's opinions, because again, people who like to collect child skeletons, I think it's more of a goalpost move eventually. I mean, I've seen people who struggle with trying to, convince denialists, whether they be residential school denialists or, genocide denialists, as to, one of their claims being that all this ground penetrating radar apparently found all these abnormalities. And so based on that, that's not the same thing as actually exhuming bodies. And then you're like, yeah, but that's not the only piece of evidence. I've had to say this so many times. It was actually discoveries of child bones, right, that actually led to the investigations that led to the discovery of the ground penetrating radar abnormalities. It actually started with the discovery of child body parts. But I mean, if that alone isn't enough for you to be like, that's fucked up. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission itself interviewed thousands upon thousands of survivors of the residential school system, who basically explained everything in firsthand accounts, what had happened. But if all of their testimonies are lies as well, which is also kind of weird that you're just thinking that thousands of Indigenous people were just lying about how they were abused, sexually abused, physically abused, and in many cases, their brothers and sisters and friends were actually, killed through a variety of different things, whether they be tortured, trying to run away in the cold and freezing to death, stuff like that. Just, again, horrifying stuff. They've exhumed bodies now. Here's one of the articles where you can read about the exhuming of bodies. It's not the only one, too, by the way. This one was a lot older. This was back in 2022, where they actually had dug up child-sized skeletons. And again, it's horrifying stuff, but I don't know what else to do in terms of where does the goalpost get moved to? Every single time you're like, hey, by the way, this happened. This is really fucked up. You should probably probably stop telling everyone that the whole thing was made up. Like, like if the baby skeletons aren't enough, I don't know what to do for the bone collectors. Honestly, I think it's people who've gotten in and painted themselves into such a grotesque corner that it's really hard for them to ever leave. Like, I don't know where you go from there. Like, what do you just do as a human from that point on, when you were like, the whole thing was made up, there's no such thing? And it's like, hey, by the way, they've actually dug up child skeletons. It's like, but how many child skeletons? Yeah, how many? How many do you need? I guess would be my question. Like, I'd want to know the answer to that first, because also that's kind of fucked up. But either way, keep doing your thing. But I didn't just want to talk about fucked up stories and, genocide and stuff. I've talked about this project a long time ago. It's actually, I've driven by it. It's being built now in Vancouver. There was a huge land back victory for the Squamish Nation, and one of the first things they did is they said they were going to develop a whole bunch of low-income housing as well as rental properties on it. It's all three of the towers have now gone up, so you can see them. A lot of the those same weird white supremacists I was showing you before, they've actually been trying to post stuff about it, like, this is what colonization looks like, look at the atrocities they're building. And I was like, giant apartment buildings? And I was like, wait, do you think that's colonization, low-income housing? The original plans for the development was basically supposed to look like this. So if you're driving down, this is in Vancouver, Burrard Street Bridge. So if you're driving by, these towers are the new ones, the green towers, where they're trying to incorporate a lot of greenery into it within the city of Vancouver. I don't think it's an eyesore. I think the whole idea of it is quite pretty. But again, if you're not into, buildings and structures in cities, I understand why this might piss you off. This is how you pronounce the name of the project.
Sanak.
There you have it. One other last cool thing about it, in the fact that it's like I think they're into phase 4 now, because 3 of the main towers here have been built, and then the other ones are being built at the same time. But I know also, by the way, I've only been throwing shade right now at right-wing white supremacists, but I also want to throw some at the clown shoes left, aka who was it? It was Peter Coffin, Caleb Maupin, the Spanky Tanky, Has. A lot of them were actually really against this whole project. They had this conspiracy theory in their heads that the entire thing was part of what they considered land back TM, like the corporatization of land back, and that the whole thing was being funded by like Amazon, or they like, I'd watched a couple of videos. It's been years now, sorry. It's been like four or maybe 3 years since I watched all that shit. But they were really against this, amongst other developments, essentially saying that this was like any anti-capitalist shouldn't support this, specifically because these were going to include rental properties, and that like landlords, whether they be white landlords or indigenous landlords, are still something they're fighting against. And so they were targeting this and saying they shouldn't do this, and the left should like unite against it and kind of stuff like that. And it was a really weird series of events at the time. You can, in principle, obviously be against the idea of renters and be against the idea of passive income generated through people paying rental property and stuff like that. But you should also be, I would say, fundamentally for things like land back, just as an issue, that it's originally the indigenous people's lands. And once they do get a land back victory, as they did here, they should have the right to do what they want on that land. You can criticize the practice itself, but it seems really, I don't know, especially coming from like almost all white people, it would just seem like a really strange thing for Caleb Maupin and Peter Coffin and all these other people to specifically be getting upset about this, where I was like, on a much grander and larger scale, there's a lot more problems than as soon as someone wins the land back victory trying to dictate what indigenous people do with the land, right? It seems like you're just falling right back into the kind of I have to tell you what to do trope there. But one cool thing about the development is how they're extracting energy. It's going to be Canada's first large-scale net zero carbon housing development, and one of only a few in the world, with an aspiration to be 100% greenhouse gas free. All of the heating and cooling will be produced by a district energy system fed by the waste heat from Metro Vancouver's adjacent sewer infrastructure. So using waste to warm the entire building in order to not use natural gas as part of the heating system, in partnership with a a program called Creative Energy. The district energy system is expected to eliminate 120,000 tons of GHG emissions over 30 years compared to natural gas heating. That's the equivalent of 2.2 million tree seedlings grown over just 10 years. The system is designed with the capacity to expand over time to accommodate plans to serve neighboring housing and interconnect with Creative Energy's downtown Vancouver network. And so based on that system, and since they're already setting up the ability and the stations to be able to extract the energy from the waste, they can also connect it to other local stations that aren't on the Indigenous land itself to be able to heat other homes using waste energy, which is also pretty cool. I thought the neat idea. I was for the whole idea.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. This video wouldn't be at all possible without the financial support of all the people whose names you see on the screen right now. And if you want to unlock secret bonus episodes, content that we can't post anywhere else, or get the videos early before anyone else gets to see them, please go on to patreon.com/theserfs. For as little as $1, you can help support this channel and help make more videos like this possible. Our executive producers are Anna Loves Riley, Adrian McCarthy, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Garrett Sandoval, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Richard Boehm, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demel, Tigwig, Trav, and Words Greenwood. And also, it wouldn't be possible without all the names you see on the screen right now. Again, if you want to help produce this content, it's only made possible through the funding of our patrons.